talking about Unit 1, Note 6. We're going to be talking about the distance formula, which is something you did back in algebra, but we're going to be reviewing it for geometry because we're going to be using it in a couple different ways. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's take a look at just using not even the distance formula itself, but just looking at distance between 2 points. Now, when you were in elementary school, you talked about distance between points on a number line. So that's what we're going to kind of look at here. So let's figure out, we want to find the distance between A and between C. So I want to find A and C on my number line. So here's how I usually go about doing this. To find distance on a number line, I want to use the absolute value symbol. Distance is always positive. That's why I want to use that absolute value symbol. So we're starting at 0. Okay, we're starting at 0, and then we want to subtract off our distance. So from our other points, so I did my farthest right point, and I subtracted off my farthest left point. So I did 0 minus a negative 5. Now remember, when you subtract a negative 5, it's going to become plus a positive. So then we get the absolute value of 5. So the absolute value of 5 is just the positive version. Well, 5 is already positive, so then my answer is just 5. Let's take a look at B and D. So we have B and D. So D is at 2, so I'm going to start at 2, and then I'm going to subtract off my farther left point, which is a negative 2. So I have 2 minus a negative 2, and that's going to become plus a positive. So then I get the absolute value of 4, which is 4. Okay, so if you get a negative, let's say you got a negative 4 in there, the absolute value of a negative 4 would just be 4, so it's not any different. I want you guys to go ahead and try number 3 on your own. So this is what the distance formula looks like. Okay, it's the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus, that should say y1 squared. So this is if you're given 2 points. You're given 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2. That's where this is going to come in handy. So let's go ahead and take a look at that in regards to number 4. So for number 4, we want to find the distance between those two. So to start off with, I want to label my points. x1, y1, x2, y2. So now I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take and I'm going to write my square root sign, and then I'm going to do x2, which is 5, minus x1, so minus a negative 4, squared, plus y2, minus y1. So we have a couple cases here where we have minus a negative. So we're going to turn that into plus a positive. So we're going to go ahead. 5 plus 4 is 9. So I have 9 squared. Notice how I'm keeping those numbers in parentheses. That's going to make my math more accurate later. Negative 1 plus 6 is going to give me 5 squared. 9 squared is going to give me 81. 5 squared is going to give me 25. You add those two together and you get the square root of 106. So if you think back to algebra, we had you simplify these radicals down. That's what we had to do. Well, in geometry, we're actually going to take the square root and get the decimal, because to me, 100 square root of 106, I have no idea what number that's going to be. So to figure out what number that's going to be, I'm going to take the square root, which is 10. 30. So when you take the square root of 106, the square root of 106, what you get is 10.29. So what I got is 10.295. Now I tell students to round it to 2 decimal points. So I look at the third decimal point. If the third decimal point is 5 or greater, I'm going to round up, and it is. So then I need to round 9 up. Well, if I round 9 up, that's going to be 10. So that's why this becomes a 3 and that becomes 0. Let's go ahead and take a look at number 5. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start by labeling our points, x1, y1, x2, y2. So let's go ahead and let's put that into our equation. So we have x2 minus x1, so minus a negative. That's going to become plus a positive. y2 minus y1. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. 8 plus 5 is going to give me 13 squared. Now, here, negative 4 minus 6. I have a lot of students tell me that's negative 2. But actually, both of those numbers are negative. So because both of those numbers are negative, it's kind of like adding them. So negative 4 minus 6, or you could look at that as plus a negative 6, that's actually going to give you negative 10. So the reason why I put the parentheses on here is because when you square a negative, it should be positive. So put it in your calculator like this when you're taking the square of it to help keep it more accurate. Okay, so 13 squared is 169. 10 squared is 100. So now we're going to go ahead and we are going to add those two, and that's going to give me the square root of 269. Again, don't worry about simplifying the radicals. I just want you to punch them in your calculator and tell me what the decimal is. So when you do that, you get 16.401. So we're going to look at that third number. I see that it's under 5, so I'm going to keep it the same. So my answer to this one is 16.40 for that one. Okay, let's take a look at number 6. Number 6 asks us to find the distance between those 2 points. So again, we're going to label our x1 and our y1. So let's go ahead and do that. So we have x1, y1, x2, y2. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to simplify this out using the distance formula. So we have y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. Okay, so negative 7 minus 3, that's one of those where it's kind of like adding it again. So that's going to end up being a negative 10. Same thing here, negative 3 minus 4, that's going to end up being a negative 7. So if you guys notice, I didn't even realize I did this. I did y2 first. So you're probably listening to this video saying, oh, Ms. Humbert, you're supposed to do x first. Here's the great thing. It doesn't matter. There are two things you need to be consistent on. If this right here is your 1 coordinate point, then you need to have both x1 and y1. Same thing with here. And you also need to make sure you're subtracting x's. Okay, but if you flip-flop the x's and the y's, if you do y first and then x, it'll still work. So then we're going to take negative 10 squared, and that's going to give us 100. And we're going to take negative 7 squared, and that's going to give us 49. So then we need to figure out the square root of 149. So I type that into my calculator. If you don't know where your square root key button is, please let me know. And when you take the square root, you get 12.206. So we want to take this 6. That 6 is bigger than 5. So we need to round this number up. So I'm going to take, and instead of 0, I'm going to put 1. So I want you guys to go ahead and try number 7 on your own. Let's take a look at number 8. A certain helicopter can fly 450 miles before it needs to refuel. Suppose a person needs to be flown from a helicopter in Minneapolis to one in Chicago. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up coordinate points. So I'm going to say up here, and I'm going to call this up here Minneapolis. This is our starting point. So I'm going to call it the coordinate 0, 0. Then we need to go to Chicago. Chicago is going to be down here. Chicago. And it's going to be at the corner point. So now to go from Minneapolis, we need to go 225 miles east. Remember, right is positive, and 175 miles south. South is going to be negative. So the coordinate point for Chicago is 225 and negative 175. So let's go ahead and calculate that out. So we're going to calculate the distance between those 2 points. So let's use our distance formula. So we're going to have x2 minus x1 and then y2 minus y1. So then from there, we're going to get, this should be squared and a plus, there we are. So we're going to get 225 squared plus negative 175 squared. Come on. Negative 175 squared. So what's that going to give us? Well, that's going to give us a square root. 225 squared is 5,625, and negative 175 squared is 3,625. So we set those equal, we get 81,250. So now we're going to take the square root of that answer, and it turns out when you take the square root, you get a perfect square. So the square root of that number is 285, and that's going to be miles. But we haven't completely answered the question yet. The question asks us, can the helicopter make it one way without refueling? So we can make it 285 miles to Chicago? Then yes, we can. because we can go up to 480. So we can make it to Chicago without refueling. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this next problem. Okay, so on here, we're going to go ahead, and we are going to look at this. So we're talking about going to a college campus. Okay, so Kelly, wow, my computer's freaking out. So Kelly has her first class in Rhodes Hall. Shifted. Let me fix this for a second here. There we are. Okay, so in order for us to get from Rhodes Hall, okay, so we need to go 1/4 of a mile. So then, and we also need to go 1/8 of a mile over here. So total, we're going 1/4 and 1/8 to the right. Well, we need to add those two. Now remember, when we're adding fractions, we need to have the same denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to multiply by 2/2. So I'm going to get 2/8 plus 1/8 is equal to 3/8. Okay, so we go a total of 1/8 to the right. So if we're starting at 0, 0 over here, this other point is 3/8. Now we need to figure out how much we're going down. Well, we're going down 3/8. So that's going to be a negative 3/8. So we're going from the point 0, 0 to 3/8, negative 3/8. So let's go ahead and plug that into the distance formula. So to start off with, we're going to be doing a little bit of fraction work, but it's okay because we're all smart people. So we're going to do 0 minus 3/8 quantity squared. And then we're going to do 0 minus a negative 3/8 quantity squared. So we're going to end up adding those. Okay, so to do that, then we're going to get a negative 3/8 squared plus 3/8 squared. And when you square fractions, you're squaring the top and the bottom. So 3 squared is 9/64 plus 9/64. Adding fractions, you're going to add the numerator. So then you're going to get 18 divided by 64, and you're going to take the square root. So you can just type that all into your calculator, the square root of 18 divided by 64. And when you do that, you get 0.53 miles. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get 10 set up for you. I'm going to do the first one, then you're going to do the other two vertices. So we want to figure out if this is an isosceles triangle. So to figure out if it's an isosceles triangle, what we have to do is we have to determine if we have two sides of equal length. So we need to calculate the distance between A and B, the distance between B and C, and the distance between C and D. Okay, I will go ahead and I will calculate AB for you, then I want you to calculate BC. So we're calculating the distance between A and B. So we're going to do x2 minus x1 and y2 minus y1, and we're going to square it. That becomes plus plus, and each of these are squared. So then we have 8 squared plus a negative 2 squared plus a negative 2 squared. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and finish solving these ones out on your own. Sorry, I kind of ran out of time. So see if you can figure out what finish AB, see what BC and CD are equal to. It's finally catching up with me here so I can get the rest of it written. So finish this out and then calculate each of those. Thanks for listening.